Every brand loves to stand for something. What if you could stand against something? An external enemy that you could triumph over. Every compelling story has a supervillain. So, can you find yours? Where would Harry Potter be without Lord Voldemort? He would be a very weak character. There would be no storyline, and they would be very uncompelling books. And imagine if you are a comic book fan, where would half of the comic superheroes be without the supervillains to fight against? There would be no story, there would be no drama, there would be no action. And I'm sure you're all thinking, okay, Sacha, that's really nice, but we're not writing a novel here, we're not writing a new comic book series about some superhero. We're talking about selling products, we're talking about e-commerce. How does this help me? How do I create drama within my brand? And how do I find a villain? And why is that helpful? Like I said, in any good story, you'll kind of find this story arc where there is a hero, which in this case is going to be your customer, and they are called to adventure and they have to overcome all sorts of challenges along the way, and then they have the transformation. That is if you are writing a novel. And again, we are actually not writing a novel, we're selling physical products online. Before I get into how you can find your brand villain, I want to actually show you some examples of brands who are killing it, pun intended. They are killing it by identifying an external enemy or a villain that their customers also identify with, and that helps the customers see themselves in the story. So let's go on my computer right now and I will show you a couple of brands who are doing this really, really well. Okay, so we have the brand called Genius Juice. Now let's just go to their homepage. And what they sell are organic smoothies with what they call no dumb stuff. So they don't have any gums or stabilizers, and they say they don't have natural flavors because what they actually talk about is that natural flavors are made with artificial things. And so they have no stevia or monk fruit, which is high in sugar. They literally are just made with what they like to call genius ingredients. So their enemy that they've identified is actually all the yucky chemicals, all the preservatives, all the additives, all the fake natural flavors that other brands are adding to their smoothies. And they actually even have on their website, you can see, so they've called out, like they consistently call out the villain here, like in all their messaging and their branding on Instagram. They're like always, showing how they measure up against other smoothie brands. And you can see here they've got us versus them. And this is like a pretty, I would say, bold move on their part. If we scroll down, we can see, the Genius original smoothie and the other guys, and they're not organic. They don't have just 2 ingredients. They have added sugar. So they're showing how they are triumphing against an enemy. The dumb stuff, they've basically lumped all of these gross ingredients together into one category, and they've called it dumb stuff. So I thought that this was a really, really genius example of a brand using the villain to help them position themselves differently and help kind of customers as well join them in this, fight against this enemy. And now another brand, like another category that's doing this really well is, I don't know if anyone's heard, but Jeremy's. So Jeremy's are a brand that is actually run by the Daily Wire, and they are a right-wing organization, and they have their brand called Jeremy's. They started with Jeremy's razors, and now they have Jeremy's chocolate, and they have identified the left or woke culture as their enemy. So as you can see, what they've done in their branding and in their positioning is they've created this chocolate, which is called he, him, she, her. One has got nuts, one is nutless. And those things are exactly what their audience identifies with. And it's not necessarily like a physical problem. It's more of a philosophical problem they've identified, and they have used it to their advantage. So those are 2 really, really amazing examples of brands who have identified an enemy and are not afraid to call out that enemy and show how they win and they can beat that villain. So I'm going to go back now into my main camera, and we will discuss how you can find the villain in your branding. The concept of having a villain and how that makes for a compelling story. And we've seen 2 examples of brands who are doing this really well. Now it's time for you to discover how you can do that for your brand. So where do we even start? So one of the first places that I like to start is with the customer. What are their frustrations? What are their pain points? And how can you help them overcome those problems? So it could be a physical problem. It could be an sort of internal emotional problem. It could be a philosophical problem. And actually, that's what Donald Miller talks about in this book, Story Brand. He talks about how you have to identify the villain for the customer, but you have to also identify sort of the shallow level, which is like, you know, the main problem they're experiencing. So just as an example he gives in the book is like Tesla identified that normal cars guzzle gas. And so if somebody is coming, so the sort of physical problem they're experiencing is that they need a new car. The internal problem is that maybe they believe in not having a car that guzzles so much gas, and that will potentially save them money. But the philosophical problem is that they want something that's more sustainable and better for the environment. So there's like levels to this. And so that is one way of doing it, is starting with the injustice or physical problem or emotional pain that your customers are experiencing. Now, another way you can do this is defining your brand values. I know this sounds like fluffy nonsense. It like can be fluffy nonsense, but if you know what your core values are and what your brand stands for, then you know what you don't stand for. You know what you're against. You know what you're fighting for. So, I mean, it just reminds me of the lyrics from the Katy Perry song where she's like, in Roar, and she's like, I stood for nothing and I fell for everything. So brands who are afraid to take a stand on certain issues, if it's suitable for what they're trying to promote, etc. So if they're afraid, then, you know, they're going to come across as sort of like weak and not very compelling. But if you're not afraid to be like Genius Juice and call out those dumb ingredients, or you're not afraid to be like Jeremy's Razors or Jeremy's Chocolate and call out things they disagree with, then, you know, that's just how you're going to help your brand. And one final way that I think is really helpful is to get really dramatic. So imagine that your brand is a superhero. Can you identify your arch nemesis? Can you identify a villain that you can fight against? It might sound like really abstract, but actually, you know, getting those creative juices flowing, pretending, dramatizing, and just being ultra creative can actually help you come up with really, really interesting solutions at the end of the day. Now, the point is that you might not necessarily land on what the brand villain is straight away. You might have multiple different villains, but once you pick the most sort of compelling one for your brand, then you should really stick with that and not have multiple villains going on, because that will get confusing. Just to summarize everything, why is finding an enemy so effective for branding and marketing? It's because when there is an enemy, it actually motivates people to take action, because this happens a lot in politics. You know, if someone's against a certain issue, they are willing to go to a protest, they're willing to riot, they are willing to stand in the street with a big sign and embarrass themselves. They don't care. And enemies prevent that kind of clear focus that makes people want to be part of your story world, of your brand. So that is my video for today on finding your brand villain. And get ready, you know, to brush up on your fighting skills and your self-defense, because you might get some hard knocks in this if you take the risk of actually vilifying a villain. So hope this video was helpful, and I will be back with more interesting thoughts on branding and marketing musings and everything else e-commerce. Bye for now.